Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. There may not be a lot of activity in the sports world, but there are a few things to chew on, so you know I got you covered on whatever is happening. As this is the JAYREELZ podcast with Joe's JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as this past Thursday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And quick programming note, actually this is more of a channel update. I just posted my latest commentary, which I'll give you the Cliff Notes version when I get to the baseball, especially now that we've hit the All-Star break. But I came out with a big-time commentary, not only on the absolute flub by what Major League Baseball did by bringing on Jacob Misiorowski, the young Brewer phenom who made the All-Star team after 1 month, 5 starts. And no offense to him by any stretch, but I talk about how baseball screwed that up on top of an even bigger problem with the sport overall as far as marketing its players, because I'm sure you're going to hear that garbage over the next 24 hours where, oh, well, Jacob Misiorowski, you had to play there because you want to put your game's youngest and brightest stars on there. But as we all know, once the game comes and goes, and let's say Misiorowski has a very good year, maybe wins a Rookie of the Year, but is he really going to get magnified that much in the sports landscape? Absolutely not. So I go in on that, and again, I'll touch a little bit on the Misiorowski All-Star selection there a little bit later on. But definitely check that out on the YouTube channel at JAYREELZ. Please subscribe, like, leave a comment, share with your family, friends, foes, frenemies as I try to get to 1,000 subscribers. So if you could please subscribe one more time, people, I sincerely and gratefully appreciate it. And on top of that, I just released that literally about 10 minutes ago. So check it out, see what you think, let me know, give me feedback, all that good stuff. And one more time, I thank you very much for doing so. Now, let's get to it. Baseball is at the break. Finally, here we are, the middle of July. The All-Star game in Atlanta with the Home Run Derby tonight. And all I got to say is this. Will I be watching? Probably not. And I get it. It's a slow sports time here. The dead zone, as I like to call it, 2.0. But unless I'm just desperate to see some balls fly out of the ballpark, and I couldn't even tell you who the whole field is for the Home Run Derby tonight. I believe off the top of my head, I think Ronald Acuna Jr. because with the festivities being in Atlanta, I believe he's going to participate. I think O'Neal Cruz, Cal Raleigh, I believe is going to be involved, which obviously leads the sport in home runs this year. So you have some names there that you could at least hang your hat on. But am I going to be attracted to turn it on at whatever time, 7, 8 o'clock ESPN to watch this thing? No, not this guy. And the same for tomorrow with the All-Star game because, again, I may have mentioned this on Thursday's podcast. The last time I saw an All-Star game from start to finish, I was in the building. That will be 12 years ago on Wednesday, July 16th, when the game was at Citi Field. And I chronicled and detailed that experience, which was very good from the start, but overall, it was just a snooze fest. And that's what these All-Star games have become here over the last, not even last 12 years, but beyond. The game is a far cry from what it once was when I was a boy. And I get it with the way the world is now, interleague, and players going everywhere from left to right. It's not a situation where back then you knew who was going to play in the National League and you knew who was an American leaguer. That is not the case today, and it hasn't been the case for quite some time. So that's why there's very little appeal on my part, as much as I love baseball, to even sit in front of the TV to watch 9 innings, let alone 1 inning. So you can take that for what it's worth, and people could say, oh, JAYREELZ, come on, you're a sports fan, blah, blah, blah. But again, what does the game mean in the grand scheme of things? And a lot of these games are 5-2, 4-1. They're low scoring and not a lot of action. Not to say it has to be 10-9, but it would be a little bit more exciting if that was the case. And they try to get in and out of these games too. So for what the All-Star game and Home Run Derby and everything, what it's worth, and the Home Run Derby has fallen off a little bit despite them tweaking it and changing the rules and speeding it up to the point where it has been a lot more entertaining than it was maybe 10, 15 years ago. But still, I am not going to be one to say, oh my God, it's 8-10. Am I missing Cal Raleigh in the Home Run Derby? Not this guy. So that's what we have with the All-Star stuff. And I'll get to Jacob Misiorowski in a second because I want to recap the first half, quote unquote. Obviously, a lot of teams have played anywhere between 92 to even 97 games for their season so far. And for the first half, with the closure this weekend, you had a lot of entertaining series and a lot of juicy storylines to lead into not only the All-Star break, but once we come back on Thursday to kind of take a look at the second half, some excitement that's been brewing. And especially in Boston, because the Red Sox now have risen from the dead. This was a team that, as of maybe 3-4 weeks ago, they were about 4 or 5 games under 500. And now, after a 10-game winning streak, and I understand they beat the likes of the Washington Nationals and the Colorado Rockies in between, but they had the Tampa Bay Rays come to town, and the Rays trying to fight it out there in the AL East with the Yankees, who were as close as a half game about a couple of weeks ago. And now they have certainly fallen way back to the pack to where the Red Sox went past them standing still to the tune of a 4-game sweep up at Fenway. And now they're nipping at the heels of the Yankees, just a game behind them. And oh, by the way, they've only beaten the Yankees 5 out of 6 in their matchups this year. So with those two teams going neck and neck, and with the Yankees and Red Sox 2 and 3 games behind the front-running Toronto Blue Jays in the AL East, now you have a little bit more juice in a division that a lot of people thought was going to be competitive. And when you got to the latter part of May and even into June, where the Yankees had a sizable lead, 7 games to boot, and now that they have come back to the pack, and with Toronto zooming past them, and now the Red Sox now trying to giddy up and see if they could surpass the Yankees once you get past this coming weekend, now you have a very interesting race there in the AL East. And that's what baseball is going to need here in the second half, because as I talked about it on Thursday, it looked like baseball is going to limp into the All-Star break, because we know about the AL West, where the Astros look like they're going to run and hide. With the AL Central, the Tigers, to me, they already have hid, because it would take an epic collapse in order for them to lose the AL Central. And then the NL West, which had gotten a little bit interesting going into the weekend with the Giants and the Dodgers. Giants 5 games back, all right. And even if the Giants would have swept the Dodgers here over the weekend, which they did not. They lost 2 out of 3 and lost a game in the standings. But the Dodgers look like they're going to be in good stead out in the NL West as far as winning that division. So you have the 2 Easts in the AL and NL. And then to wrap it all up, on top of all that is what's going to happen in the NL Central, where the Brewers have certainly gained some ground, where they're just 1 game behind the Cubs, who won 2 out of 3 at Yankee Stadium over the weekend after losing the first game there on Friday night. So you do have some things to chew on, despite the fact that division races, out of the 6, 3 of them seem to be a formality, but the other 3 look like they could be pretty interesting. Now, obviously anything can happen. The Red Sox with this 10-game winning streak, I'm sure the All-Star break may come at a good time, but I would think Alex Cora would wish that they had a game tonight, so to see if this streak could go to 11, 12, and beyond. And who knows if this break's going to hurt them. Now they're going to come out of the break playing the Cubs at Wrigley over the weekend, so who knows if this break is going to help or even hurt the Red Sox, but that we'll have to wait and see. But that's what you had there with the divisions, where at first, it looked like it wasn't going to be too juicy, but now it looks like it's picked up a little bit, especially when you look at what's happening there, more so in the AL East as well as the NL Central. In the NL East, obviously that's neck and neck with the Phillies and Mets, and of course I'll break that down a little bit. And then with the wild card too, you're going to have a lot of teams there going to fight it out. Now, it's not going to be as sexy with these teams, more so in the American League than in the National League, because as I look at the standings there as far as the wild card goes, you do have Yankees, Red Sox, Mariners. Those are the top 3 teams, 4, 5, and 6 when it comes to the wild card scenario. And then after that, you have Tampa, who are 2 in the loss and a game and a half back. And then you have Texas, who are 4 in the loss, 3.5 back. And then, am I going to get serious about the Twins and even the Angels for that matter? Now, granted, they're in the mix there, 4 games back with the Royals and Guardians, 4.5. And granted that those teams right now are below 500 and mediocre at best, and you have to throw them in, but it's not really that juicy or even that sexy for that matter, because those teams, you would think that even if they do get on a hot streak, a la the Tigers of last year, and give it up for what the Tigers have done, because even with that 31-10 streak to close out the season, and they did win the 2 games in Houston, and they pushed the Guardians to a 5th game in the division series, do you expect, whether it be Minnesota, the Angels, Kansas City, or even the Guardians to be one of those teams that could be a threat, not only in the wild card, but if they advance to maybe even push whomever they face in the division series, I'm not going to say that right now because those teams aren't powerhouses. And people could say, well, what about the Tigers, JAYREELZ? They didn't really have a lot to work with going into the postseason, and they went up against an Astro team that had been to how many straight ALCSs? Well, the Astros cannot win a home game to save their life in the postseason. That's why they were out. And then the Guardians, despite a good year, but the Tigers gave them all they could handle. So, yes, every year is different, and I understand you may have a Cinderella, but the American League doesn't bring a lot of excitement, in my eyes, especially when it comes to the wild card. Where in the National League, it's a little bit different because you have Brewers, Mets, Padres, your top three teams, and those three teams made it into the playoffs last year. Whereas in the American League right now, yeah, Yankees, Red Sox, although a big brand, big name, but they weren't in the postseason last year. And Seattle, who they've been up and down. And talk about them closing out the first half in big style. Now, Seattle lost an abominable game against the Yankees there Thursday night where they lost the first two games of that series. And then they were 5-0 going into the bottom of the eighth with Brian Wu throwing a no-hitter. And then what happened? They scored 3 runs in that inning, including a Giancarlo Stanton 2-run homer. And then Austin Wells had a 2-run scoring single with 2 outs in the bottom of the ninth to tie the game. And then Aaron Judge walked it off in the 10th to where the Mariners were on the verge of maybe even no-hitting the Yankees. And they ended up leaving Yankee Stadium with a series sweep. Losers. And what happens? Their next series, they got to go to Detroit to play the Tigers. Oh, geez. So now we're going from the frying pan into the fire. And what did they do? They embarrassed the Tigers over the weekend to the tune of scoring runs left and right, 15-3 and 11-4, these crazy scores. And the Mariners, who you think that, oh, geez, after losing those 3 games at the stadium, now they're going to go to Detroit and just get pasted and limp into the All-Star break. And now they've turned their fortunes around to where they have the final spot as far as the wild card is concerned in the American League. But even still, do you trust the Mariners at any point, big time, when it gets to deep into the regular season, trying to secure a playoff spot? And then obviously if they get into October, one more time, not this guy. So that's where the American League's going to fall short. With the National League, it's Brewers, Mets, Padres right now. But then you also have the Giants, who are a half game behind the Padres. You also have the Cardinals, who are 2 in the loss, but 1.5 back of the Padres for that final spot. Then you have the Reds, Terry Francona, who got his 2,000th victory. God bless him. I think he's the 13th manager in Major League Baseball history to do so. They are 3 in the loss, 2.5 back of the final spot there. And if you want to throw in the Diamondbacks, but they're 3 under 500 and they're 5.5 back. I won't even include them right now. And the Reds, you only pick them because of the manager. And yes, they do have a very good pitching staff, a young staff at that. But when you have teams like Giants, Cardinals, Padres, to a lesser degree, but the Padres have been obviously in the playoff mix here over the last few years. Mets, Brewers, that's a lot more of an upgrade that you see there in the American League. And yes, I know that the Yankees right now are in 4th place in the wild card. And again, the Red Sox, we know the brand. But after that, it falls off precipitously. When in the National League, at least there is a little bit of sex appeal. So that's where I'm coming from as far as this first half. Closing it out and making sure that when we get to a second half preview, which will be on Thursday, at least you have a taste and an idea of what to expect here when you get to Thursday's podcast. So that means you have to come back, people. So don't just look at it's the All-Star break. I'm going to put my feet up. I'll come back when the season picks up a week from today. I'll hear JAYREELZ talk about what happened over the weekend. Come back on Thursday so I can give you my little crystal ball and see what I could forecast for a second half in baseball, which could be intriguing, but at the same time, could be grasping for straws as you get into the dog days of August and beyond. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But that is your pretty much first half. Now, I'm not going to go through I could go through surprises and disappointments. You know what the hell, I'll do that. And I know I mentioned this in the baseball preview way back in the latter part of March. And my surprises, I did pick the Reds, and right now they're in the mix here. Athletics have been a disappointment. I picked them as a surprise. And really, there should be no surprise, considering that the A's moved from Oakland to Sacramento. And even though with some free agent signings and re-signing of their own players, the Brent Rookers of the world, etc., they have certainly underachieved there in the AL West. And I don't know if they're going to have any resurgence here in the second half. That, I think, is going to be highly unlikely. And then my disappointments, I picked the Mariners. Now, here they are. They closed out their first half strong, but I didn't think Seattle, because of their hitting, and we know they have a very good pitching staff. And yes, they're in the mix, so I cannot call them a disappointment, but I really thought that they were not going to be a team that was going to be a factor, despite the fact that they have a very good pitching staff. And as it was, they were in first place for pretty much the first 2 months of the season. Now, when you got to the latter part of May till now, the Astros went by them standing still. So, yes, they are still a part of the playoff mix, no doubt. And I can't call them a disappointment, but based on their start and where they are now, maybe you could call that a disappointment. Because the Astros, who would have ever thought? Now, they should be one of the big surprises, considering Kyle Tucker, gone. Alex Bregman, gone. Yordan Alvarez has not even suited up. And here they are in first place with, what, a 7-game lead in the AL West? So if you called them a surprise coming into the year, well, although it would have been a stretch at the time, but knowing that the personnel that they've lost, not only just this past year, but over the last couple of years, and here they are with one of the best records in the American League, yes, I would deem them as a surprise. And I also picked the Cardinals as a disappointment, but they've hung around and they've played pretty well. Despite the fact there have been rumors about their third baseman being traded, and I would think they're probably going to keep them right now. And their pitching staff is pretty much in shambles. They don't really have a true ace, but they've been able to piecemeal it together and do a very good job where they're hovering in that wild card race. Now, could they fall off? Could they fall out? Will they be buyers at the deadline? Who knows? But as of right this second, I can't call them a disappointment. So I've been way off. Other than the Reds, I picked them as a surprise. But this has been the type of year that baseball, I'm sure they're happy to know that a lot of these teams are still in the mix. And even though you may have some fringe teams, whether it's Arizona or forget about the teams that are under 500 that I mentioned, especially in the AL Central, that are still part of this wild card race. But that's what they want. They want to have as many teams possible within striking distance or at least on the fringe of probably getting a berth into the playoffs come October. Now, as we all know, teams are going to fall back out of the pack or they're going to just float out to sea. And I'm sure we're going to see that probably as we get deeper into the month and into August. But right now, at least baseball has some teams that are hovering around, that are hanging around, and may have a play here as we get closer to the deadline at the end of the month. And hopefully when you get into August and September, that they could either be laying in the weeds or have that run like the Tigers did last year, or just be that one team that could all of a sudden just turn the league or turn the wild card race upside down and therefore clinch and get themselves into October. So that we'll have to wait and see. And quickly, I'll go with my over-under totals of the year. My overs, I picked the Tigers, 83.5. That's a slam dunk. The Nationals, 70.5. That right now is on the cusp. They could be a team that could maybe go on I'm not going to say a hot streak, but as you know, ebbs and flows of what's going to go on in the regular season. And maybe they'll just eke on by in the last week of the season to where I'll get 71. And then Milwaukee, 82.5 as an over. I think they should be fine. So right now, that should be 2 locks and 1 maybe as of right this moment. As far as the unders, I picked the White Sox 54.5. That's going to be very tricky. The White Sox will probably just get over that unless they have just a terrible stretch here as you get into August and the dog days, as I mentioned. Tampa, 80.5 is an over, or excuse me, is an under. That right now is looking very bad. I think Tampa's going to surpass that. And I've had my hits and misses with Tampa over the years, but I just didn't think. And anything can happen. Remember, they have a ton of road games here in this month and into August because of rainy season and front-loading their schedule to play a lot of home games. So that certainly could be a situation where Tampa could lose 20 or 27 and I'll be in play here to win this thing. But right now, it's not looking good. And give it up, the Angels, 72.5. And what do they have right now, 44? 47. And right now, they're looking pretty good. And that's without their manager, Ron Washington, who had to leave with some health issues. So maybe they're going to rally around that to have a decent second half to at least surpass that 72.5 number. So right now, I'm looking at possibly 2-4, which is awful. 3-3, which is nothing to write home about. And maybe, just maybe, I may eke out 4-2, which is respectable when it comes to my over-unders. And maybe come Labor Day, we'll revisit these numbers and see where we're at as we get to the home stretch of the baseball season. But other than that, as far as baseball goes, that's what you have. I mean, the Red Sox, like I said, they're the story. 10 in a row. They've pitched well. Ceddanne Rafaela has been fantastic. Alex Bregman's back in the lineup, and I'm sure has given a boost. And obviously with the Rafael Devers, which they may miss his bat, but right now they're maybe not missing the attitude because this team is gelling at maybe not the right time, but at a good enough time to know that they're closer to the top of the division than they were at the bottom just a month ago. And with the Yankees right in front of them, and they're not going to be afraid of the Bronx Bombers and the Pinstripes by any means, considering, as I mentioned, they've beaten them 5 of 6. So, yes, that race is shaping up pretty good. And the Red Sox right now are the story, among others, because, like I mentioned, a lot of these series over the weekend, whether it was Seattle sweeping Detroit, the Cubs winning 2 out of 3 at Yankee Stadium, you got a couple other series, Houston winning 2 out of 3 against Texas, the Dodgers keeping the Giants at bay, winning 2 out of 3. So a lot of good series. And that's what baseball's going to need to drive us through the rest of the summer. They're going to need a lot of juice. They're going to need a lot of buzz. And I get it. Baseball is for the older guy like myself, maybe for some of the younger folks out there who play baseball and maybe follow it or love it as much as I do, which I hope that's the case. But let's just hope that whatever buzz that they got going into the All-Star break, and with the game tomorrow night, and who knows how that's going to play out in home run derby, etc., and with the few days off before the season picks up on Friday, all we hope is that a lot of teams are a factor in all this. Because the last thing you want are for plenty of these division races, and you got half of them that are almost over, if not already over, and here it is July 14th. But you don't want a situation where it's just going to come down to a handful of teams, whether it's for the wild card in both leagues, and the divisions are pretty much a wrap by the time you get to Labor Day, and it's a scenario where, all right, you got 3 teams fighting for one spot, or 2 teams fighting for one spot. No, you want to get 5 or 6 teams fighting for 2 spots or even 1 spot. That's where the excitement's going to come in, and that's what you can only hope that baseball will have come the second half, and I will take a look, bigger picture of the second half when we revisit on Thursday. Now, I have to throw this in. Now, this is going to be a Cliff Notes version, people. As I mentioned at the top, I put out a video on the YouTube channel at JAYREELZ talking about Jacob Misiorowski, the Milwaukee Brewer phenom, who's had a tremendous start to his Major League career. He came up on June 12th, his first start against the St. Louis Cardinals, where he had to leave the game with, I believe, a cramp, but he threw 5 hitless innings against the Redbirds. And then in his next start against the Minnesota Twins on the road, I might add, he started out with 6 perfect innings until he gave up, I believe, a walk and a home run. His first hit was a home run that he gave up, where that snapped his streak of 11 hitless innings to start off his career, which was historic. And granted, he is 4-1 with a 2.81 ERA, a fastball that he could throw through a brick wall, but he was announced to the All-Star team the other day, to where Trey Turner, the Philly shortstop, said that that's effing terrible. Who made this decision? Was this the manager, Dave Roberts, who is the manager of the NL All-Star team this year? Was Rob Manfred involved to where they got all their minds together to say, hey, we should put this kid in the All-Star team? Who's hurt, who's out, whatever. We got to put this kid in. And they did so. And to me, this sets a bad precedent, not only for this year, but moving forward. And I break that down in the video. So you got to go back to the video. And I don't like the move, just to talk about the move. It's also a bigger problem that Major League Baseball has, not only with this, as I mentioned earlier, but you definitely have to check it out. Please subscribe to the channel, like, leave a comment, etc. Share it with your family, friends, foes, frenemies, the whole nine, as I mentioned earlier. But to me, it was disgraceful because not only, and it's no fault to the kid, but this just sets a bad example moving forward because with that example being, I'll say real quick, what's going to happen next? You're going to have a kid that's going to come up June 29th and he's going to have a hot week to where he bats 600 and he hits 3 home runs and 10 RBIs and now you got to put him on the All-Star team? Is that going to be the next thing that happens? So that's why I don't like the move. That's why they should not have done this and therefore watch him go out there and he get lit up like a Christmas tree and then everybody's going to justify the reason why that he shouldn't have been a part of the All-Star team, and that's the case. Well, we'll wait and see, watch him strike out the side and have an immaculate inning and then shut everybody up in the process. So that's what happened to baseball. Is there any other news and notes I got to tackle here before I move along? No, I think that's pretty much it. No, we talked about that. No, Major League Baseball, yep, etc. Oh, Aaron Judge, the fastest to 350 home runs in his career. He hit one there on Saturday in a loss. Give it up there. And you got to wonder about Max Fried in this blister because he had to leave that game against the Cubs with that blister. I believe it's on his left index finger. Now, how severe it is. Now, he has the All-Star break, and was replaced on a team off the top of my head. I don't know who. So Fried is going to obviously not be able to pitch here tomorrow night, and who knows if he's going to miss his next start. I'm sure they're going to push his start to whatever that fifth start is, where the season starts on Friday. So if they do play on Monday, his spot would be Tuesday. So whether or not he'll be ready a week from tomorrow remains to be seen. But if it's that severe, who knows how long he's going to be out until it heals. So that's something that the Yankee fans have to keep in mind here as we move it along. And then you also had Shohei Ohtani with 3 scoreless innings on Saturday against the Giants as he continues to ramp up his activity as far as him being stretched out to be a starter to go at least 5 innings. So very encouraging news there. Then you also had a scenario where the draft was last night. I know the draft isn't anything close to what the NFL or even the NBA has to offer, but the Nationals had a very questionable first pick overall because a lot of people thought that they were going to pick either Cade Anderson, who is a pitcher, or even Ethan Holiday, who is the son of Matt Holiday, where he went to Colorado with the 4th overall pick. So talk about synergy there, where Matt Holiday obviously played a bulk of his career. I understand with the Cardinals and then later on with the Yankees, but we all know him as the Colorado Rocky. Well, his son Ethan was picked to go along with Jackson Holiday, 2 sons that were picked in the top 5, or brothers, I should say. Obviously, they're sons, but 2 brothers picked, which are similar to what we've seen in the past with BJ Upton and Justin Upton and Delman and Dimitri Young. So congratulations to the Holiday family with that. But for the Nats to choose Eli Willits was a surprise among a lot of people. I wouldn't know who Willits is if he fell on me, but there may be some controversy there with that pick, knowing that they could have picked the Cade Anderson or even Ethan Holiday, for that matter, with the number 1 pick, and they didn't do so. So that's for what that's worth. And again, I don't have my fingers on that pulse. That's just what I read. I don't know if that's a knock on Willits. Maybe to a certain degree, that could have been a bit of a reach. So we'll have to wait and see as time moves along. If the Nationals, and remember, they fired Mike Rizzo, who was the GM and, of course, the architect of trying to build the team, and whoever the interim is picked Willits. So let's see if that's going to be a boom or bust. That is obviously in the years to come. And Lee Elia, the one-time manager of the Phillies and the Cubs, had an epic tirade. You can go check it out on YouTube. Died at the age of 87. Thoughts, prayers, condolences go out to the Elia family, Cubs, and Phillies, and of course Major League Baseball for that matter. All right, now let me turn my attention. Let me get my tennis racket, break out the shoes, and get on the court, a grass court in this case, to recap Wimbledon. And it certainly lived up and maybe did not live up to what we thought it was going to be on Thursday, because we thought that it was a possibility that Iga Swiatek, who had risen from the ashes, considering that after the French Open last year and how she precipitously had just gone backwards to the point where she went from number 1 in the world to number 8 on the planet when it comes to the women's side. And I'll start there. I'll get to Alcaraz and Sinner being the champion. But I want to talk about this because for Aryna Sabalenka, a lot of people thought it was Sabalenka's tournament to lose. We talked about this ad infinitum the last 2 podcasts with all the top 5, even top 10 women's players who are ousted there in the early rounds, opening rounds for that matter, and beyond. And for Sabalenka, it looked like she was going to be the one that was going to win this tournament. And with Sabalenka losing to Amanda Anisimova, and in a very competitive match, it was 6-4, 6-4, 6-4, but obviously Anisimova got the 2 6-4s, went the distance, and Sabalenka played well. She didn't have any of those moments where she had those mental errors or mental meltdowns, as she's known to have. All you got to do is just look at the French Open there against Coco Gauff in the final and give it up. Sabalenka, who was very good, but Anisimova was even better. And Anisimova played her heart out, just was stellar, fantastic, put any superlative you want. But the sad part about that was, as great as she played, in that semifinal match against Sabalenka, she was a complete no-show against Swiatek in the final. It was almost as if she let all the gas out of the tank in that match, to where she came on the grand stage, the women's final, to be ready to see whether or not she was going to piggyback off of that performance against Swiatek, who, as I mentioned, Swiatek, her star has fallen a little bit from grace, not completely out of the picture, but to the point where she was number 1 for so long, and then now she dropped back almost out of the top 10. And here she was, knowing that she has never won a Wimbledon. She has won 5 majors, 4 French Opens, and 1 US Open. And she's had a lot of trouble on this surface and at this venue. And what does she do? Not only did she win in straight sets, not only did she not dominate Anisimova, but she did not lose a game. What they call a double bagel. She won 6-love, 6-love. Only the 3rd time that has happened in the history of the sport on the women's side. I think the last time it happened was in the early 90s with Steffi Graf. And who did she beat in that? Let me see if I can look that up. But for Graf, the last person to do so, I believe that was 1992. No other player has done that. And Swiatek. And sometimes that's how the sports universe and the sports gods work. Because here it was. I'm not going to say she's fallen on hard times or it was a scenario where, it looked like she was not going to be heard from ever again. I'm not going to go even remotely close to saying that. But she had not played well, as I mentioned, since that French Open of last year. She had won 4 of the last 5 after winning at Roland Garros there last year. And since then, nothing. She has come up way short. Has not come anything close to the number 1 player. And because of the way the chips fell with Anisimova ousting Sabalenka and not having that mano-a-mano that what we would have thought would have been an epic bout or epic clash with the former number 1 player and the current number 1 player. And we didn't get that. And what we got was just an obliteration. And kudos to Swiatek winning her first ever Wimbledon title. And yes, Steffi Graf in 1988 beat Natasha Zvereva in that final, 6-love, 6-love, and she won the French there, 37 years ago? So that was the last time you saw a double bagel where it was a clean sweep, where not a game was won or to be had by the opponent. And that's what you saw there Saturday with Anisimova not mustering up anything close to what she did in the semifinal against Sabalenka to what happened with Swiatek. And now you got to wonder whether or not Swiatek is going to be able to piggyback this into the US Open and maybe get her sea legs and her game going to the point that maybe she gets back deep into a quarterfinal, semifinal, and a final, which she won, I believe, in 2022, which would be great for her, great for her fans, and even great for tennis. Because if she was a former number 1 player and had really taken a few steps back, maybe now this is her way to get the catalyst of winning this Wimbledon to maybe getting close to that number 1. Now, right now, she's ranked number 3. So she moved up 5 spots just in a matter of really hours. And now, let's see if that momentum can carry her. She still has to wait another 6 weeks before that tournament begins. But right now, you have to feel good if you're Swiatek. Now, she's going to have to put up a good tournament here. That's not to say she has to win. But she has to, at least in my eyes, can you get to a quarterfinal? Or how about a semifinal? Because if anything short of that, I would almost think that this was a mirage. And granted, I get it, a lot of the top women's players were knocked off big time. But you are a player that's won 6, count them, on 2 hands, Grand Slam titles. So that's got to be worth something. And yes, you have plenty of time between now and then. It's not a Coco Gauff where you won the French and got ousted in the first round of Wimbledon. No, you have some time to relish. You have some time to celebrate and bask in this just wonderful story by her. But you have plenty of time to recover, recoup, and get yourself refocused and reset to see what you could do here in this final Grand Slam tournament, which will take place on the other side of the bridge there at Flushing Meadow for Swiatek to shine yet again. So you know, as we get closer to that tournament, and when we get to the storylines, that's going to be one of them to see how she's going to perform after what she did there at the All England Club. And then with the men's, it wasn't the match that we were hoping for with Sinner and Alcaraz, but Sinner showed and even mentioned it in his post-match interview. And we talked about this 5 weeks ago. And I didn't lead the podcast with this only because it went 4 sets and Sinner certainly had this match. It was his to lose, especially after winning the second set. All right, fine, it was all even up. But the third set was the turning point because Carlos Alcaraz was up 4-3 in the third set. And obviously we all know very pivotal. And from that point on, down 3-4, that's where Sinner took over. He actually ran the table, winning 6 of the next 7 games to where he won the next 3 to win the second set 6-4 and took a 3-1 lead in the fourth set. And then that's when Alcaraz started to claw back and got himself to a point where he was up 4-3. And up 4-3 where Sinner was down 40-15. And it looked like Alcaraz was going to now put the pedal to the metal. But then what happened, or I may have that mixed up. No, it was actually at 4-3, Sinner had the advantage. He was up 4-3. Now he was down 4-3 in the third set, where Alcaraz looked like he was going to be able to take that next step. But that's when Sinner got the next 3 to win, as I mentioned, and it was up 3-1 here. But Sinner had the advantage at 4-3. But Alcaraz at 4-3 was up 40-15 and looked like was going to get the equalizer to tie it there at 4. And then what happened? Sinner then took over from that point, won that point 5-3. Alcaraz did get the next point to make it 5-4, and then it was just curtains for Alcaraz at that point, to where Sinner won 6-4 in the fourth set, his first ever Wimbledon title. And just as I was going to mention, I know I got lost in the shuffle there with the post-match interview, and I did talk about this 5 weeks ago. I said to myself, as bad as that loss it was for Sinner, you have to wonder how he's going to bounce back from that. And you knew he was going to play well here to get to a point where he was going to get to a final. We were hoping that Alcaraz got there, and he did by beating Taylor Fritz. All right, little tricky there. He lost that first set 4-6, and then they had that tiebreaker where Alcaraz won in the fourth. But you knew that Alcaraz had the match in control. And then with Alcaraz facing Sinner, with Sinner facing Djokovic in the semifinal, and Djokovic tweaking his leg there in the quarterfinal where he beat Cabelli, and you just knew he was going to be compromised and not 100% to where he was valiant, but lost in straight sets. I believe he lost, 6-3, 6-3, 6-4, or it may have been 3-4-4, but nevertheless, it was not a doubt that Sinner was going to advance to a final, and it was just a matter to see them matching wits. And listen, Alcaraz got the first set, winning 6-4, but then, as I mentioned, for Sinner to get the second set and then that pivotal third set to where he was down 4-3 and overtook him there to win that third set. And then, as we discussed, 4-3, where it looked like Alcaraz was going to get the equalizer there, but Sinner said not today, and he was able to go up 5-3. Alcaraz got the next point, and then obviously it was game, set, match. And for Sinner, you knew that had to be satisfying and even gratifying to know that what he left on that clay, knowing that he was up 2-0, and knowing that he had several chances to put away Alcaraz at Roland Garros and was unable to do so. And for him to say in the post-match interview how, yes, that burned inside of him, but it was a blessing because he went back to the drawing board. He looked to see what went wrong. He looked to see what were the things that hurt him, the weaknesses that all of a sudden had Alcaraz come back from 0-2 to win that match. And mind you, that was on clay, where here it's on grass. And for Sinner to overcome that, to slay that dragon. And now he's going to have to go back there next year at a French Open to slay that dragon. But remember, in between what happened there in Paris, they also met in Rome. Now, mind you, it wasn't a Grand Slam final, but they met at a tournament there in between, and Alcaraz beat him there. So it could have been easy for Sinner to have the snakes going on in his head to say, I can't beat this guy, no matter what it is that I do. He's just that good, and even mentioned that in the post-match interview. But he found a way, and he found not necessarily weaknesses, but he found strengths in his game that he knew in order for him to overcome. And a lot of those points that he got were at the net, where Alcaraz tried to drop shot, and what did Sinner do? Cross-court shot, where Alcaraz couldn't make an attempt to volley. And those are the things, those small things that you did not see in Paris, or even Rome for that matter, that you saw in London. And that's where Sinner was victorious. And congratulations to him. He was just stupendous. He played an excellent match and certainly overcame what he did there in the previous two matches against Alcaraz, and including one on a big stage there at the Grand Slam. And for Alcaraz, listen, you just chalk it up to Sinner being better. Now, he had a bunch of aces in the match, but he also had a bunch of double faults, especially in that second set, which hurt him. And I don't know if that crept into his psyche or that bothered him or that was a factor. Who knows? But Alcaraz, although he was good, but in order to beat Sinner yesterday, he had to be great. And he wasn't great. And I like Alcaraz. I'm a fan of his. And I got to be objective here. Sinner was that guy yesterday. And he was not to be denied. And even after losing that first match where he could have gotten that, oh, here we go again attitude, he did not. He stuck to what, as he said, throughout his training and throughout a lot of the research there over the last 5 weeks to know what it is or what it's going to take to beat this guy. And he stuck to that game plan. And they stuck to whatever the team put forth over that 5-week period. And it certainly culminated in him winning a title. So all I could say to Sinner is congratulations. Now, it's going to lead to something that's very interesting into the next Grand Slam, which, of course, the U.S. Open. Will we see a third final match between these two in a row? Because, mind you, these guys, they have won the last 6 Grand Slam majors. And you have Sinner at 1, Alcaraz 2, Djokovic 3. And there is a significant drop-off after that. And I would even like to say, although a little bit early, but you may have the makings of Russell Chamberlain, of Ali Frazier, of Crosby Ovechkin. You may have, not definitively, may have Sinner and Alcaraz in that same sentence, in that pantheon, when it's all said and done. These guys are 22, 23 years of age. Their best tennis is still ahead of them, and they're playing their best tennis right now. And we could possibly get maybe a tiebreaker of sorts, considering that at the French, you had Alcaraz beat Sinner, Wimbledon, Sinner beating Alcaraz, and a big question mark to see whether or not there'll be another clash of these Titans there in the opening weekend of the NFL season, that Sunday where the curtain will be raised, where you may have Sinner and Alcaraz yet again to fight for a Grand Slam major, and who will get the 2 out of 3, especially of these last 3 Grand Slams. It'll be fascinating. It'll be theater. And I understand the football will literally eat up and swallow what tennis will have to offer that day, even if it is Alcaraz and Sinner. But you know what? Yours truly will be all over that. And let's just hope that that's the case, because anything less than that, there won't be a diehard sports fan that will look forward to an Alcaraz versus or a Sinner versus without those two facing off against one another on that Saturday, which will open up the NFL season. So just something to keep in mind as we're moving along. I hope that's going to be the case. You can't predict that, but based on what we've seen here in these past 2 tournaments, I think it could possibly be a foregone conclusion that those two will match up yet again for another championship final. Now, as I'm moving along, this is going to be quick hits, people, because not much else is going on in sports. And I guess I'll just click them right off. NBA, you had a few transactions here, but I'll start off with the Cooper Flagg getting shut down for the rest of Summer League. I couldn't even tell you what the rest of Summer League, how the schedule breaks down. Is it over Wednesday? Is it over Friday? Is it over next weekend? I don't know. But they're shutting down Cooper Flagg. I know the big story was Cooper Flagg and Bronny James, which got a pretty big rating for a Summer League game. I think they got less than 1 million people watching that. And you know that's the 15 to probably 30-year-old that got wrapped up in that. And kudos to them. Obviously, they got a rating. But I guess they told the basketball fan now, no more Cooper Flagg from here on out, which I know that's going to piss off a lot of people. Does it bother me? A little bit, because you'd like to see more of the number 1 overall pick. But again, he's an investment. He's a guy that they do not want to get hurt. They know that the franchise is banking and even hinging the prospects of a good season, not necessarily a great season, on the shoulders of the 18-year-old kid. And granted, they have Anthony Davis, and granted, Klay Thompson and Kyrie's on the mend, who probably won't come back till well after the All-Star break, which we're now talking late February into March. But they do not want to do anything to upset the apple cart and get this kid hurt or injured for any significant amount of time, whether that bleeds into training camp or the start of the year. So I can understand why. So I understand a lot of people aren't going to like that. And to a certain extent, yours truly, I don't, but I get it. So that's what you have there. Now, as far as signings and transactions, Jalen Williams, the third big-time contract that the Oklahoma City Thunder and Sam Presti, the GM, has offered. The 4 for $285 for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the 5 for $250 for Chet Holmgren, and now you got 5 for $287 for one Jalen Williams. And I get it. It's what the market dictates. These players are going to get this type of money. Now, with the second apron, I'm sure they're able to work that out to have 3 players, even though it's not a scenario where 3 players making that kind of money. Now, I don't know what it is annually. You can break it down what it is, but who knows? Is it going to be an escalator deal where Jalen Williams is going to get $30 million, but by the time he gets to the end of that 5th year, it's going to be $78 million? That I don't know. I don't have the inner workings of what the contracts are going to look like as far as the annual year and what that does to affect the second apron. I'm sure they're doing whatever it takes to avoid that. That's why they got these 3 players. Anybody after that, though, it's going to be pretty much a crapshoot as to what they're going to get, especially if they blossom into anything close to what these 3 players are. And that's not to say Chet Holmgren or Jalen Williams is a slam dunk automatic first team or second team all-NBA player. Generally, those type of players get that type of money, but they got it. Congratulations, kudos to them. But how that's going to affect the team moving forward as far as having to pay the other 9, 10, or 12 guys, that is going to be a factor. But they got the 3 big ones in tow, and those are the ones that really count if they want to play for championships, not only next year, but for years moving forward. Then you had Cole Anthony, who's probably going to get bought out by Memphis. He says he's going to sign with the Bucks, which I think that's a good thing for Giannis and company. Cole Anthony from North Carolina, son of Greg Anthony, good player, young player, good scorer, will be complimentary on a Buck team that needs some young talent and needs to provide at least some more security for Giannis to stay there. Not that he's going to go anywhere or he's even admitted to wanting to play elsewhere, but it's still a situation where for a Buck team that's trying to find their way, they got rid of the Chris Middletons and the Brook Lopez's of the world. Yes, they kept Bobby Portis. And they let go, of course, Damian Lillard, as you know. But they want to try to piecemeal this team the right way to keep their star player not only happy, but also a team that can compete there in the East. So Cole Anthony, is he a guy that moves the needle? No, but he is a complimentary player, and I'm sure will help out there if he does sign with the Bucks, as he stated there a couple days ago. Herb Jones stays in New Orleans, 3 for $68. Very good player, good role player, but he gets paid. And Fred VanVleet is your president of the Players Association, which was previously held by CJ McCollum. So now Fred VanVleet, obviously a lot of respect throughout the league amongst the players. He'll have that title for the next 4 years as the NBA moves it along. Now, let me lace up the skates, go on the ice. This will be real quick, people. Although I did catch the schedule, which I'll get to, but there are a lot of small deals made in the National Hockey League. Josh Manson re-upping with Colorado for 2 years, the defenseman. Ryan Reeves getting traded from Toronto to San Jose. And even the Penguins, who continue to wheel and deal, they acquired Archer Silovs, their goaltender, and Matt Dumba, the defenseman, in 2 separate deals. So they try to do whatever it takes to keep their aging core of Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, and Chris Letang. I don't even know if he's still there. I believe he's still there on another 1-year deal. I don't know if that's going to do a lot, but as we all know, the Penguins have not played well, did not clinch a playoff spot last year. And just because those guys have a pedigree and a DNA doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to translate into going out with one big last hurrah, despite the fact that they're trying to tweak their team as best as possible. But the NHL, as I saw earlier, they have their schedule, well, it'll be released tomorrow, but they have the opening night schedule where they're going to do a triple header. Now, where these games are going to be played on is beyond me as of this very moment. But October 7th, which will open the NHL season, at 5 o'clock, the banner will be raised again down in South Florida, where the Blackhawks will be the visitor, and the 2024-25 champions, once again, will get the rings. the whole pomp and circumstance, the ceremony where Connor Bedard will be in uniform for the Blackhawks. So that'll be 5 o'clock to start off the NHL season. Then at 8 o'clock, you have the Penguins, aforementioned, playing at Madison Square Garden against the Rangers as they'll host. And then the nightcap will be Colorado visiting the LA Kings. So a triple header. I guess the games will be released, or I should say the networks will release where it's going to be on, TNT, ESPN, whatever. And now that I take a look, because the CBA, although they renegotiated and they have extended it, but this forthcoming year, and I'm just catching wind of this will be the final year of the 82-game regular season schedule. I thought because it was collectively bargained that this coming year was going to be the 84-game schedule that they've agreed upon, but that's not going to start until the 26-27 year. So this is the last year of 82 games before moving forward to next year. And the schedule will release tomorrow. Maybe I'll touch on a few highlights. Let's see where Edmonton and Florida, where they'll play, because that was a disgrace last year. One of the games was on NHL Network, and the other one wasn't even on any of the networks. I believe that was the game in Edmonton last year, where those two games, TNT should have one of those, and ESPN should have the other. And that is it. Case closed. Just like you see with the NBA Finals matchups the next year. So where Oklahoma City and Indiana, well, it won't be TNT this year because obviously TNT is gone out from that. But I would think you're going to have ABC, ESPN have the one game, and then the other game will go to NBC, Amazon, whatever. Now, Amazon's a joke because you got to stream it. I get it. But hopefully they can stream that on NBC, or have it not streamed, but over the air on NBC. Well, they'll have that matchup, and then the other matchup will go to the other network. That's how it should be. None of this, oh, let's hide this game, or, oh, it's not on any network that the NHL does. That is a complete disgrace. That is certainly really malpractice when it comes to your sport. And despite the fact that Edmonton, Florida, nobody could handpick Connor McDavid out of a lineup, but still, both of these teams have played in the last two Stanley Cup Finals. Could you at least broadcast these games on cable, TNT, ESPN, or even on regular air, ABC, on a Saturday night before the Super Bowl? How about that? Isn't that a noble idea? Well, let's see if they do that. But obviously, it's a lot of time between now and then. But I'll take a look at the schedule one more time. Let's see. It's released. I thought it said tomorrow or maybe Wednesday. Yeah, the remainder of the NHL schedule's released Wednesday, so I'll talk a little bit about that on Thursday's podcast. And then lastly with the NFL, as I put on the helmet and shoulder pads, Ndamukong Suh retired, did not play, I believe, the last couple of years, but we all know coming out of Nebraska was a wrecking ball there. Drafted by the Lions, I believe number 1 overall, had a very good career. I believe he's a Hall of Famer. I got to see how many All-Pros he has. Let me look at that real quick. Now, we know he was a disruptive force. He was a guy that you always had to have your eyes on if you're an offensive coordinator. And he certainly had Hall of Fame talent. Now, he had a lot of instances where he stepped on offensive linemen's legs. In particular, I believe it was that one Thanksgiving against the Packers at home that one time. And he's had a lot of incidents with other players, quarterbacks, things of that nature, where he had gotten suspended and it was a situation where you couldn't really trust him as a guy if you wanted to have him on your team as a, like I mentioned, disruptive force, but he could also be a disruptive force for your team, let alone for the opposing team. And Suh, he played defensive tackle. Now, he wasn't an end. And let me see how many All-Pros, because that's how I'm going to really determine whether or not he should be a Hall of Famer. Now, he was 3-time first-team All-Pro, 2-time second team. The Pro Bowl doesn't really, I could care less. All right, was an all-decade team. Now, he was a 5-time All-Pro, 3 first-team. You'd like to see more first-team All-Pros, and he should have been at least 5 first-team. If he was 5, he would have been a lock. I think he's going to get in eventually, but because he bounced around a lot, his reputation, I mean, he was with the Lions, then he went to the Dolphins, played with the Rams for a year. All right, he did win a championship with the Buccaneers there in the 2020 year, but by then, he wasn't the same player that he was early on in his career. And what were his numbers here? Let me see if I can take a look. 71.5 sacks. That's very good for an interior lineman. But when you think about it, how many did John Randall have? And John Randall was a guy that, if I bring up John Randall, he had a ton of first-team All-Pros and had well over 100 sacks. So if you want to really match up defensive tackles, that is one. Forget about Joe Green or Bob Lilly or Randy White or guys like that, because those guys are in the pantheon. You won't even throw Aaron Donald. He's another guy. But for Ndamukong Suh, he's going to get in, but he is borderline, if you ask me. But he retires. I'm not trying to throw cold water on his career. Obviously, a very good career. Won a Super Bowl, etc. So on to the next chapter. Kudos to you, Ndamukong, and what you do moving forward. Then you had Najee Harris, who got hurt in a fireworks accident. Now, I don't think he was actually lighting up the fireworks, although other people got injured. But he hurt his eye. I don't know if it had to be with a firework that got awry, and obviously being affected by that. I believe, based on what I've read and have seen, no pun intended, that he'll be ready for the start of the season. And with the Chargers opening up training camp Wednesday, because they have the Hall of Fame game 2 weeks from Thursday, I don't know if he's going to be ready for that, but we would think he'll be at least participating in camp at some point until he's 100%, but he should be ready for the start of the season. And then sad news, you had a lifetime Cardinal, St. Louis, going back that far, and Arizona, who was a left tackle there, played 13 years for the Cardinal franchise, 3-time Pro Bowler, Louis Sharp, who his wife had announced on one of his social media channels, passed away at the age of 65. Don't know the cause of his death, but certainly was a very good player. Played on those Cardinal teams when they played at Busch Stadium. I mean, think about that. Before they moved to the desert and played at Tempe Stadium, and had a very good career, 13 years, 3-time Pro Bowler, but had to give him his just due. Thoughts, prayers, condolences go out to the Sharp family, the Cardinals, the NFL, on the passing, 65 years of age, way too young, people, as you all know, as he transitions to the next stage of the afterlife. And sorry to close out on that note, but that will do it. Another episode in the books. Thank you so much for stopping by, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the wonderful world of sports. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe, rate, review, throw me a few stars, write a review on Apple, Spotify. JAYREELZ.com is the website. Of course, one more time, on YouTube at JAYREELZ. Please subscribe there, because the little engine that could this channel is I try to get to 1,000 subscribers. I'm that close to 675, so I still got 325 plus to go. So with your help, people, if you could do that, I would be eternally grateful for your participation in doing so. If you have a question, comment, suggestion, you can do so at the following social media platforms. Not only the channel on YouTube at JAYREELZ, but on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ Podcast, or JAYREELZ on Instagram. JAYREELZ1, just the number on Twitter. The old-fashioned way, the JAYREELZ Podcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. It's in the blood, it's in the DNA. Been doing this now for 7+ years, and independently, full-time, for going on a year and a half. That's right. I got to start getting paid, people. That's why your participation is vital to the success of yours truly. This podcast, live streams on Wednesday at 12 noon. So join me on YouTube for the live stream, on top of commentary videos, the commentary that I just released there literally about an hour ago. Check that out, about Jacob Misiorowski and the All-Star selection, how that got all screwed up. Also, critique videos, which I posted a couple already. Anything and everything has to do with sports, and even lifestyle for that matter, because without what's going on in the background of yours truly, that's going to channel, no pun intended, the YouTube channel moving forward, I got nothing but content. And if that's what you want, that's what you got, because as long as I'm in front of this microphone and camera, I will deliver nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ Podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx, the South Beach, the South Central, the South Pacific, and all points beyond. Peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ Podcast, on the flip, baby.